What's going on, Misfits? Hunter and Sherb back at Misfit HQ today, talking to you through a progression for the strict muscle up. When we get started, lots of competitors, once you get those first muscle ups and then you start to be able to string them together, we kind of ditch that false grip. That's the crux of the strict ring muscle up. We need to have that dialed in before we get on the high rings. So we're gonna actually start on the low rings, just kind of giving you an idea of almost like the movement pattern that's required to do this. So Sherb's gonna he's probably gonna want some chalk. And then we're talking about the false grip. Remember, the rings are gonna be across kind of the meaty portion of the palm and right over the crease of his wrist bone. So right where his wrist joint is, and you'll see that as he leans back, his wrist is really cocked. It's almost like at 90 degrees. It's pretty uncomfortable, and it should be. Honestly, if you think that's a really comfortable position, maybe you're a gymnast, or maybe you're not doing it right. And then once he leans back, in order to get his elbows extended, he can rotate his wrists out slightly, so his knuckles are pointed forward or just slightly out. So once we've got that false grip locked in, and really guys, that's super important. It has to be a secure false grip. What we're gonna talk about is the setup of the rings. So Sherb's got rings at a height where he can be at the bottom of his ring dip when he's standing on his feet. Once he's there, he can get set up. He's gonna scoot his feet just a little bit further forward, and you're gonna have to play with the distance of your feet a little bit. But what I'm looking for is for Sherb to be leaning back a little bit, because that's another important point once we get on the high rings. So he's leaning back a little bit. He's got that false grip locked in. And what I'm looking for him to do is just perform a couple of ring rows where he's aiming for those rings to get to about sternum level with that false grip locked in. So you can give us like 3 ring rows, Sherb. Okay. Lets those knuckles come out. He's keeping those knuckles close together so far that he can give himself a little fist bump. That's how close those rings are staying. You can relax, okay? Once he's kind of got that pattern down of just that false grip style ring row, the next thing is him to continue pulling with his arms, making sure that he's not using his lower half, because you don't get that on the high rings. He's gonna continue pulling with his arms, pulling those rings underneath his armpits, and getting that weight of his torso and head over the top of the rings, okay? So he's gonna lean back in that false grip ring row, and then continue to pull through into the bottom of that dip. Next, before we get onto the high rings, this is a great kind of intermediate step. Some of you might not need it, but it's a terrific way to start. We've got a band, a 1.5 inch thick band. Obviously, the thinner the band, the less assistance you get. We just attach that to one side. He feeds it through. He can put it through his wrist, or he can just set it on top of the ring itself and kind of lock that in. He's gonna hop himself up into a kind of seated position on that ring. I'm just gonna stop him from swinging so he can go fully straight. Okay, in this position, we're looking for his heels to be off the ground, so he's in that hollow position, and when he's ready, he's gonna try to tie those things together, and then he can do the dip if he wants to, not totally required. We're just trying to get kind of the movement pattern down here on the low rings. So we've got that band to assist, and I would recommend going from a thicker band, then go to a really thin band, and then we can move over to the high rings. Once we get onto the high rings, you can either set a box kind of off to the side or have rings set up maybe a little bit lower so you can fix that false grip in. Sherb's pretty comfortable with this, so he's actually gonna jump up, really lock that false grip in. And before we start, what we're really looking for from the athlete is there to be kind of a backward angle in their positioning, okay? So his feet are gonna be slightly in front, almost in that hollow position. It's really difficult to go through that strict ring muscle up if you're totally vertical. That's a really long way to pull. So I'm looking for him to be leaning back a little bit so that he can pull those rings to his chest and then snap himself over the top, okay? So he's gonna hop up, really lock that false grip in. He's got that backward lean, elbows flared, and when he's ready, snaps himself up and over the rings. He's making it look a lot easier than it is. If kind of the intermediate, this is too big of a jump in difficulty from the low ring banded muscle up, we have an option for a banded muscle up on the high rings. You're gonna be limited a little bit by how thick of a band, just because of how much tension you can get into that thing, but we just feed one end of the band through, the other end down at his feet, and now he can lock his false grip in. We still want the same mechanics. I'm just gonna stop him from swinging, but that band gives him a little bit of additional assistance while he's on the high rings, might even allow him to string multiple reps together to get used to the movement. So there you have that progression, going from kind of just dialing in that movement pattern to a couple of ways to develop the strict ring muscle up. Ultimately, the foundation for this movement is having a strong foundation of strict pull-ups and dips. If you don't have, I would say, at least 10 solid reps of each of those, strict ring dips and strict pull-ups, even strict chest to bar pull-ups, you're gonna be better off working on those gymnastics movements and developing the upper body strength, and then bringing it over to the high rings. Give it a shot. We'll see you guys in the next one.